Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about a MMA breakdown, UFC 272, Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. There's a lot of good grappling and jiu-jitsu. I ran a fight companion with my good friend and student Brian, and it was a great card. It was awesome. There's a lot of grappling, a lot of jiu-jitsu. So we're going to start with this picture here. This is a basic takedown. So that's kind of where we're going to get started in the fight, right? So first thing, round opens up. They're trading punches. And I'm going based off like my notes and some of the study material of the match that we saw. And immediately, Covington is just pushing to go to the ground. If you notice the first point, Masvidal complains a little bit about the eye poke. And Covington kind of capitalizes on that. As when he looks at the ref, he goes straight for the takedown. Masvidal has a good whizzer and he has a good defense, but Covington just keeps going, gets a hip body lock, switches to the back control, and then he's able to bring Masvidal to the ground. And then you really see the difference here of his wrestling. And Masvidal is just playing catch up. Now, I don't know the history. I know there's like what the media is telling us about the history, but these guys were training partners. Guys, I train in the gym a lot. Like I'm there every day pretty much, and sometimes twice a day. And when you train with teammates, you do build a bond. There's like this unspoken language of building a bond. So I can imagine, unless you train martial arts, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, mixed martial arts in this case, and a little bit of all of those things, then you won't understand how hard it really was for these guys to fight. I just have to say that because when you fight a former teammate, it's tough. The second thing is there's that emotional, barrier you have to get through. But the other thing too is, aside from the emotional barrier, there's also the technicalities and the strategy. So I can imagine you're Covington, you're coming in, you're trying to help the wrestling with these fighters, and I can just see Covington pretty much wrestling and dominating grappling with Masvidal in the training room. This happens all the time, guys. You always have some people who kind of have a wrestling background. I have my good friend Alex is a former Division I wrestler. Another friend of mine, Chip, who trained with me for some time, also a former Division I wrestler. It's just a different caliber of people. And I mean that in a very positive way. These guys train in wrestling culture. They're just tough and they just put it on you. And so having said that, to really understand how hard it is, it takes years to develop the skill of wrestling, right? Like it really does, because you have to teach your body, your brain to go 100 miles an hour for 2 minutes. Those are the rounds in wrestling, 2 minutes. 2 minutes is not a long time, but then it is a long time when you start to think of the grappling world, right? And so completely anaerobic energy system that they're utilizing with their bodies. Complete fast twitch muscle fibers. So the guys tend to have more muscle mass than other sport competitors. So you see the wrestling that Masvidal has to deal with, and there's almost like this sense of conviction that Covington had. It was as if he knew, okay, we've wrestled, we grappled. I would dominate him in the training room. I'm going to dominate him here. And you can see a slight hesitation from Masvidal, just a little bit, because Covington not only, of course, he dominated the wrestling, but it was even his timing. He timed things perfectly. When he threw a shot, he would move around. He would throw a jab. He would switch his base from a jab to a cross and immediately go for a double or single leg. Like simple wrestling, he would move around, kind of parry some of his kicks that Masvidal would throw. And as he would parry them, he would come back with a cross and then immediately go for a takedown. He always utilized some sort of movement to get into a clinch or to get into his shot. And those of you that wrestled completely understand what he did. He put on a wrestling clinic. And the reason I say wrestling more than grappling is because there was grappling. And so I'm leaving it on this picture so you could see. But it was really the wrestling engagement that really led Covington to win in this fight. The second thing, was his cardio. Wrestlers are known to have an amazing cardio and also an amazing fortitude when they push And there was a bit of there was a communication. Herb Dean calls Covington in the second round. Hey, we reviewed that tape. You did poke him in the eye. So just kind of a heavy warning. For the most of the fight, it was just pretty much domination from Covington. And you were able to see how he was able to switch levels, use his jab to set up a beautifully timed shot. And he kept doing this over and over again. He kept kind of just really going to what would be like a beautiful setup on a single. I even think he did like a duck under at some time. And, to be honest, to be fair, like he was throwing a good combination of strikes to kind of really set up his timing with this. So if you guys haven't trained before, understand that it's very tough. You got the emotional barrier of fighting with a teammate. Then you got the technicality, right? The strategy, and then that kind of is circular, right? It kind of goes back to the first barrier. Emotionally, if you've been dominated by a wrestling coach or a wrestling teammate in the training room, that's tough. That's tough to get over. And I'm sure Masvidal was, leading the sparring matches with the striking rounds that they did at the gym. I'm sure he knew he would get the better of Covington. Having said that, striking, they looked pretty even until the fourth round, as you guys saw. In the fourth round, Masvidal landed a beautiful punch that just didn't drop him, but it kind of did. I mean, he did fall, and then he had time to recover. But really, when you look at the majority of the fight, the judges look at all 5 rounds. They're gonna look at what was, who was in control and what was dominant. Okay. And the other thing too is Masvidal, his match with Damian Maia, Damian Maia comes from a jiu-jitsu background, right? So, I obviously love Damian Maia, but Damian Maia is not a wrestler. Now, he wrestles, but just because it's a jiu-jitsu fighter who wrestles doesn't mean they're a wrestler. The way a wrestler sets up a lot of these combinations, from the clinch, from the pummel, from the underhook, from the wrist grab, is very different from the way a jiu-jitsu fighter or anybody else would control the same type of body movement. So it's super important to understand that. And there's parts where Covington would, pummel and take him against the cage and he would knee him. And I think there was some controversial complaints that at one point he had another low blow. So Covington was trying to use, he was playing a little dirty, but he was trying to use every edge to kind of just mess with Masvidal. And it did. I think it worked. You look at the gas tank of Covington, it was just relentless. He just kept coming forward, even in the body language. When the referee, Herb Dean, would start him again, you could just see Covington kind of pace and move much more aggressively towards the middle, whereas Masvidal would wait, hopefully try to catch him with a flying knee, but try to pace and use some of his striking and his low leg kicks, which again he was doing, but it wasn't doing enough damage in the beginning of the fight to really make a difference. So a lot of learning here. In this picture, you can, we go back to the picture, you can really see how look at how he's dropping levels and turning the angle. There's a lot of good stuff. I have a few steals here. The next thing I want to talk about is when he was able to get the back. The way a wrestler gets the back is a little different. You're right. They're focused on really turning you and getting points on trying to get as close as they can to pin you. When I'm talking about wrestling, I talk about folk style, which is American style wrestling, which is very different from freestyle. And if you don't know the differences, I would highly recommend you take some time and study those. Any wrestler will tell you they're completely different. To a person who doesn't wrestle, they look the same, but they're not. They're very different. And folk style, a good person told me once, a good example, a person told me was, folk style is like jiu-jitsu without submissions, right? It's constant control, constant maneuvering, but you can't submit them. You just have to pin them and take them down and get as many points. So in this picture, you see Covington is coming, he has the back. He would do a lot of he would dig his shoulder to the back. Unlike a jiu-jitsu person who gets their hooks and tries to capitalize on the back take, his was different. He wouldn't get the hooks. Maybe he would get one, but he would really focus on cranking the neck, which is very different from jiu-jitsu. In jiu-jitsu, we try to get a choke. We try to slip our elbow underneath their chin. Here you can see in the picture that it's over the chin. I mean, this happened throughout the fight. So it's really tough to finish someone. I know that another thing, ironically, is kind of like a barrier for fighters are the gloves. Actually, grapplers don't like MMA a lot of the times. for a lot of reasons. One of them is gloves actually prevent you from finishing submissions a lot, believe it or not. It's very hard to finish a rear naked choke, which is why Damian Maia always had like a modified rear naked choke when he would finish them. And so like if you look at the gloves, it's very tough. Damian Maia would kind of crank against the face and then bring his glove across and then kind of do like a semi version of the rear naked choke. It was a really good modification he would do that made him work. But here, Covington is obviously not a jiu-jitsu guy, so I think he played a smart game. He's going to use his wrestling, beat him up, go for a crank. I didn't think he was going to submit him just from the experience I've seen and the background I've seen with Covington. Beautiful, like, again, dropping levels. Even when his head was on the outside, he would go back, force the clinch and the position, charge him right into a fence. Masvidal seems like he's gotten away with this before, but you just saw a little bit more conviction in Covington. And the reason I say that because I did see both of these guys fight Usman, and they both approached this fight differently. Especially Covington, he just had like this belief that his grappling was gonna do it, and he kept really dominating from the takedown and the timing and the clinch and the setups all the way to the back take. And when I say back take, I really mean like back control, because I wouldn't really call this a back take in jiu-jitsu. You wouldn't call this a back take, you'd say back control. And you don't get points for this in jiu-jitsu. But in MMA, who cares about points, right? You're dominating the fight. Look at how he connects his chest in this picture to Masvidal's back, and how he's always like really connecting his hips and almost like pinching his knees together when he goes for this. This next still is, again, you would see this position a lot, and here's another perfect picture of him taking the back. And you see how he like gets his right hook in. See, a jiu-jitsu practitioner usually will get the other hook and prioritize the other hook and really focus on getting control of the back. Here, Masvidal is using the cage actually to isolate the other side of Masvidal's hip. Covington is using it to isolate Masvidal's hip, and Covington is using his right hook to kind of pinch and pin him there and just open him up with punches. I mean, I think that was a smart strategy. There was no rocket science. I think he knew his wrestling was going to win him this fight, and that's exactly what he did. Great picture to kind of see what they're doing here and what Covington was really focusing on. The next picture happened a lot. They landed a lot in Masvidal's closed guard, which, for someone who doesn't, really rely on jiu-jitsu, being on your back in closed guard is a very frustrating position. There was a lot of stuff he could have done, but he wasn't doing because he's just not comfortable here, and you could see it. So, Covington for the most of the fight was just like really grinding him out and going back to like the old school, late 90s, early 2000s, ground and pound, when all these awesome wrestlers learned jiu-jitsu and they would just sit in your guard and just beat you up. Covington was, doing that. And it's important to note when, Covington's tattoo, that's USA Wrestling. So it just shows you how, proud he is of his wrestling background and how he utilized it. A few times, if you look at this picture, he's like grabbing the back of the head, kind of like a can opener, but he's not using it to submit. He's using it to just kind of really make it uncomfortable, landing elbows, punches. And then when he had the opportunity, he'd open up and he would start to pass the half guard, isolate his opponent, pinch his knees, drop his hips, go to side control, crossface, underhook, smother. He'd smother Masvidal's face, and then he would drop an elbow. And then he would really go back into half guard, pinch, grab an underhook, and just stay super tight. And then elevate his hips, push pressure forward, really leveraging that shoulder pressure. So stylistically, this was a tough fight for Masvidal. Great fight for Covington. And what could they have done to prepare better for this fight? It's really tough. When you fight a wrestler like the caliber of Covington, you cannot learn enough wrestling to beat him at that game. Your game is striking, right? So something that I would have done as a coach is really focus on the striking and use a lot of the setups. I wouldn't say to counter wrestling, but I would say to use grappling to maybe counter wrestling with Ashigarami, one leg X, Senkaku, positions that, because wrestlers, they're so obsessed with power and control, and because they're so obsessed with power and control, they usually posture up and they're very stiff going down forward, so they give their legs a lot. You see this a lot of times when wrestlers go to MMA or even jiu-jitsu matches where they grapple grapplers, and you just see them expose themselves a lot. There was a super fight a few months ago between a former collegiate wrestler, very high caliber, was on the Olympic team. He's a coach at UNC. I believe his name is Tony Ramos. He trained for a grappling match with Nicky Ryan, who is Gordon Ryan's brother. And what you saw was exactly what I'm saying. Nicky Ryan pulled guard and Tony Ramos got leg locked. Because of the style, the wrestlers just tend to give their legs so much. I would have preferred to see something like that. Maybe more guillotines, head and arms, Bravo chokes, Darces. Just set up some different things that made Covington respect his grappling. But, those why, in my opinion, if you were to treat, I guess, like time as currency, those are your better bang for buck, because you're not going to be able to hang with a wrestler, and not in a 3-month camp. Heck, not in a year camp. But if you learn some serious grappling, some leg lock setups, some head choke setups, then when you are taken down, with your striking, you'll be able to like really defend well, and if not catch the person, use it to have him respect to create space to come back up. I don't know if that makes sense. So, like, for example, if Covington is working a pummel and goes and drops for a single to a double, immediately go for the guillotine. He has a guillotine tight. Obviously, he's probably not going to finish it. So when he scoops, he uses that guillotine, cups the chin, and kind of technical stands up to create space, right? Like, ideas like that. Or maybe Covington takes him down. He can then go Ashigarami, start going for ripping the heel hook. If Covington stays, he can rip and the heel hook match is over, right? If he spins with it, then he uses it to not to sweep, but to kind of evade and come back up. So it was just, I'm biased when it comes to grappling, and so that's how I would handle it. So again, run with these real quick. It was the wrestling that really won Covington the fight. His cardio and his timing of his wrestling and enabling the clinch, going for the duck under, single leg, different setups. His back control. I wouldn't say back take, but his back control, really pinning and just gassing Masvidal. Those of you that don't know, when you grapple, it's really, really exhausting, especially when you're on the bottom, because you're trying to move. Those of you that don't grapple and you say, you just get up, it's not that simple. Trust me, when you have someone who's using leverage, body weight, and gravity. And then the more back control, opening him up, throwing punches, and finally ground and pound from inside the closed guard. Other than the fourth round, in my opinion, Covington lost most of those rounds. I would say he probably lost fourth round because of that drop. It was a really nice combination that Masvidal connected with. But yeah, guys, I think this is a great opportunity for you guys to learn from watching this stuff. Anytime you watch MMA, yes, it's entertaining. Absolutely have fun watching it. But more than anything, learn from it, because this will make you a better martial artist. You'll be able to learn grappling, be able to learn striking and wrestling, and kind of see how all of those styles really tend to open up some opportunities for the grapplers. So hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Wanted to really just highlight this last fight. It was a really exciting fight. So much to learn from these matches and so much to learn from these fighters. And until next time, guys, I hope that you start picking up some of this stuff and incorporate it in your training. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Until then, I will see you next time, and hopefully see you soon on the mats. Keep training.